When I turned 34, my father and mother made a stunning declaration that they were shifting every penny of what should have been mine to my younger sibling, citing her status as a parent while I remained childless. They anticipated my quiet acceptance. What they received instead was a single pointed inquiry about our grandmother that, within hours, set off a legal chain reaction that would dismantle their entire plan. This marks the true beginning of what unfolded, and you'll want to stay until the very end. Be sure to follow along so you don't miss what happens next. We're always interested to know where our viewers are joining us from around the world. Drop your location in the comments below. For 3 consecutive days, I'd been wrestling with a migraine that wouldn't quit. The kind that settles behind your eyes and makes every light source feel like a personal attack, every sound amplified to an unbearable degree. Today marked my 34th year on this planet. Under different circumstances, I would have sent my regrets and stayed home. I would have pulled every curtain closed in my apartment, ordered the blandest soup available for delivery, and remained horizontal until darkness fell. But declining an invitation from Thornton and Vivian wasn't something you did casually, especially not when they had reserved a table at Bellemont, the most ostentatiously French establishment in the entire metropolitan area, specifically to acknowledge this particular milestone in my existence. I pulled into the parking area 10 minutes ahead of schedule, swallowing 2 pain relievers in my vehicle before making my way inside. The restaurant assaulted my senses immediately, a symphony of clashing cutlery and performative conversation that scraped against my frayed nerves like sandpaper. My parents' arrival brought an unwelcome surprise. They hadn't come alone. Penelope accompanied them. My sister, the favored offspring, the one who had blessed the family with grandchildren, a title Vivian spoke with the reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. Penelope appeared disheveled, her hair hastily pulled back, wearing that particular expression that typically meant she required financial assistance, childcare support, or frequently both. "Greetings, sweetheart," Vivian murmured, grazing my cheek with her lips. Her fragrance overwhelmed my senses, some floral concoction that immediately intensified my queasiness. "You appear exhausted. Have you been struggling with sleep again? You really ought to try that herbal infusion I forwarded you information about." "I'm managing fine, Mother," I responded dishonestly, settling into the booth. "Just concluded a demanding week at the office. Quarter-end financial reporting. Always with the career. Thornton muttered as he positioned himself, straightening his neckwear. He avoided looking in my direction. His attention appeared fixed on the menu before him, though his eyes weren't actually reading the words. He appeared anxious. Thornton was someone who took pride in maintaining authority, in being the family patriarch who handled difficult decisions. Yet this evening, perspiration dotted his upper lip. "You dedicate excessive energy to that position, Penelope. It's detrimental to your well-being." "It covers my housing expenses," I replied, attempting to maintain a pleasant tone. "For a residence that sits vacant," Penelope interjected. She grabbed the wine selection, studying it with aggressive intensity. "I fail to understand why you require 4 sleeping quarters, Nadine. It's pure excess. The twins are currently sharing 1 room because our addition has stalled indefinitely, and you're maintaining guest accommodations that gather nothing but dust." I took a drink from my water glass, ice cubes clinking against the sides. "We're not having this discussion tonight, Penelope. It's my birthday." "Precisely," Thornton stated. He closed his menu with an emphatic snap. He placed both palms flat against the table surface. "That's actually what requires discussion. We have something for you. Well, it's not exactly a gift. It's a family determination." The server materialized, smiling with professional courtesy, prepared to collect beverage requests. Thornton dismissed him with a dismissive gesture. "Allow us 5 minutes." The silence that descended felt oppressive, suffocating. I looked from Vivian, who busied herself adjusting her napkin with excessive care, to Penelope, who displayed a faint smirk, to Thornton, who resembled someone preparing for combat. "Your mother and I have engaged in considerable contemplation," Thornton commenced, his voice adopting that grave lecturing quality he employed during my adolescent years. "Regarding the estate, regarding grandmother's assets." My stomach constricted. Grandmother had departed this world 6 months prior. The wound remained raw for me, though the remainder of the family appeared to have processed their grief the instant the memorial service concluded. Her will awaited execution the following week. "What about it?" I inquired. "Well," Thornton cleared his throat, "it represents a considerable sum, beyond what we anticipated, and we must consider the requirements of the entire family. Fairness doesn't always translate to identical distribution, Nadine." I knew precisely where this conversation was heading. I could feel it in my bones, a cold dread expanding through my chest. "Penelope is experiencing difficulties," Vivian interrupted, reaching out to touch my hand. Her palm felt damp. "With 3 young ones and the house renovations and her spouse's reduced working hours, she's overwhelmed, Nadine. You're aware of this. And you," Thornton directed a finger in my direction. "You are thriving. You occupy a senior-level position. You have no dependents. You maintain a surplus in your monthly income. You don't require a financial windfall. So," I stated, my voice trembling slightly, "what exactly are you conveying?" "We're exercising our discretionary power as executors," Thornton declared, his voice hardening. "We are redistributing the inheritance. Your portion, the share grandmother intended for you, will be transferred to Penelope. It will eliminate her debts and complete her house. It's the only ethically appropriate action. We knew you'd comprehend." They stared at me, expectant, entitled, waiting for me to nod, to smile, to fulfill the role of the attractive, childless daughter whose sole purpose is supporting the real family. I looked at Penelope. She wasn't even attempting to appear grateful. She looked victorious. "It's for the children, Nadine," Penelope said, taking a breadstick. "You can't prioritize yourself when children are involved." The pain in my skull intensified, blinding white for a moment. But as it receded, something else took its place. A cold, crystalline clarity. They weren't requesting my opinion. They were informing me. They were appropriating a life-altering amount of money from me. Money grandmother had explicitly promised me during our lengthy Sunday visits together, and they were disguising it as charitable action. The betrayal cut deeper than the announcement itself. It was a precise surgical removal of my position in this family. For an extended moment, I remained silent. I couldn't formulate words. The air in the restaurant felt thin, as if their audacity had consumed all available oxygen. I observed the bread basket. I observed the flickering candle positioned at the table's center. I watched a droplet of wax travel down the side and solidify. "Nadine," Vivian pressed, her voice adopting that whining quality she utilized when she wanted to accelerate matters. "Please don't create a spectacle. It's already finalized. The documentation is with the family solicitor. We simply wanted to inform you directly so there would be no unexpected surprises." "So it's finalized?" I asked, my voice surprisingly stable. "You've already instructed the attorney to transfer my portion of the trust to Penelope." "It wasn't a trust, Nadine." Thornton corrected me quickly. Too quickly. "It was a general estate distribution. Grandmother left everything to me to allocate, as I deemed appropriate to my beloved son Thornton to provide for the family. That's conventional language. I am providing for the family, the portion of the family that requires it." I looked at him, truly looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jawline, the way his eyes shifted to the left. He was lying, not about the money going to Penelope. He fully intended to execute that plan, but about the mechanism. My silence was creating discomfort. Penelope shifted in her seat. "Goodness, don't be so theatrical. You earn substantial income. Why do you even care? What were you planning to spend it on? Expensive trips? Another feline?" "It's not about the money, Penelope," I said softly. "Then what is it about?" Thornton snapped. "Because it feels like you're preparing to be difficult. I warned your mother you'd be difficult. You've always been possessive." I took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to overturn the table, to scream, to enumerate every single instance I had financially supported them, every time I had served as the designated driver, the unpaid childcare provider, the emotional support system. I suppressed it all until I was nothing but ice. "I just have one question," I stated. Thornton rolled his eyes. "Proceed," I locked eyes with my father. I didn't blink. Did grandmother know? The reaction was instantaneous. Vivian flinched as if I'd physically struck her. Penelope frowned, looking confused. But Thornton? Thornton went pale. The color drained from his face so rapidly it resembled a blood pressure drop. He reached for his water glass, and his hand was shaking so violently the water sloshed over the rim onto the white tablecloth. That is irrelevant, Thornton stuttered. Grandmother is deceased. Nadine, I am the head of this family now. Did she know, I repeated slower this time, that you planned to disregard her specific wishes regarding the distribution of her assets? Did you inform her when she was lying in that hospital bed that you were going to exclude me? I didn't exclude you, Thornton hissed, leaning forward, his voice a venomous whisper. I am managing the estate, and how dare you invoke her like that? She would have wanted Penelope to be secure. She loved the great-grandchildren. She did, I agreed. But she also knew who visited her. She knew who coordinated her medical appointments. And she knew who requested money from her every single month for the last decade, and who never asked for a penny. You think you're superior to us? Penelope spat, her face flushing crimson. Just because you have a career, you're cold, Nadine. That's why you're alone. Grandmother knew that too. That's sufficient, Thornton said, slamming his hand down again. People at neighboring tables turned to observe. He didn't care. He was rattled. The decision is final. The transfer occurs tomorrow morning. If you attempt to challenge this, Nadine, if you attempt to drag this family into court and waste money on attorneys, I will ensure you are alienated from every single person in this clan. Do you understand me? I looked at my father, a man who had raised me, a man I had once admired. I saw a bully who was terrified because he knew he was walking on thin ice, even if he didn't know exactly why yet. I understand perfectly, Dad, I said. I picked up my purse. I'm not staying for dinner. Happy birthday to me. If you walk out that door, Vivian called out, her voice trembling with manipulative tears. Don't expect us to call you. I don't expect anything from you anymore, I said. I walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hitting my face. My headache was gone. In its place was a sharp, vibrating adrenaline. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. Thornton thought he had won. He thought his intimidation tactics had worked because I hadn't screamed or thrown wine in his face. He thought the standard language in the will was his shield. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Grandmother hadn't just trusted Thornton. In fact, toward the end, she hadn't trusted him at all. To comprehend why my father's face drained of color, you need to understand my grandmother, Cordelia. She was a woman of steel and silk. She had constructed a modest real estate empire during the 1970s, back when men wouldn't even acknowledge her presence in meetings. She was sharp, observant, and she tolerated no fools. Growing up, I was the only one who seemed to understand her. Penelope was the baby, the adorable one who performed for rewards. I was the quiet one who sat in her study and organized her files because I appreciated the order of it. As we matured, the dynamic solidified. Penelope and my parents viewed grandmother as a bank vault. I viewed her as a person. For the last 5 years of her life, as her health declined, Thornton became obsessed with preserving the estate. He constantly discussed legacy and keeping the assets in the family. But I knew what that meant. Thornton had a history of failed business ventures, a restaurant that folded within 6 months, a tech startup that was essentially a pyramid scheme. He was terrible with money. He liked the appearance of wealth, but he lacked the discipline to maintain it. And then there was Penelope. My sister wasn't evil, but she was a bottomless pit of need. She had married a man just like our father, charm over substance, and they lived perpetually beyond their means. The extension she mentioned at dinner, it was a sunroom with heated floors they couldn't afford, which had been sitting half-finished for 2 years because they ran out of cash. Grandmother saw all of this. 6 months before she died, I was sitting by her bedside. It was just the two of us. The chemo had made her frail, but her eyes were as bright as ever. "They're waiting for me to die, Nadine," she had whispered, her voice raspy. "Your father is already counting the acres." "Don't say that, grandmother," I had soothed her, adjusting her blanket. "It's the truth," she snapped softly. "He thinks he's going to get it all. He thinks because he's my son. He has the right. And he thinks he can bully you out of your share because you're too polite." She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Don't be polite, Nadine. Promise me. When the time comes, don't be polite. Be smart." I had promised her, not fully understanding what she meant at the time. Now, sitting in my car outside the bistro, I understood. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name. Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore wasn't the family solicitor. My father used a strip mall lawyer who charged flat rates and did whatever Thornton told him. Mr. Whitmore was grandmother's personal attorney. He was an ancient, terrifying man in a three-piece suit who cost $400 an hour and looked like he ate sharks for breakfast. Thornton hated him. Thornton thought grandmother had fired Whitmore years ago to save money. She hadn't. I hit the call button. It was 8:30 in the evening. I expected a voicemail. Instead, the line clicked open on the second ring. "Nadine." His voice was gravelly and calm. "I assume the dinner did not go well." "They're moving the money, Winston," I said, staring at the entrance of the restaurant where my family was likely ordering expensive wine on credit, celebrating their victory. "Thornton told me tonight. He claims he has executive discretion to reallocate my share to Penelope. He says the transfer happens tomorrow morning." There was a pause on the line, then a dry, dark chuckle that sounded like paper tearing. "Executive discretion," Mr. Whitmore repeated, savoring the words with mockery. Thornton always did have an overinflated sense of his own authority. He is operating under the assumption that the will is the primary governing document. "Is it?" I asked, my heart hammering. "For his share?" "Yes," Mr. Whitmore said, "but your grandmother and I set up a separate structure for you, Nadine, specifically to bypass him. He doesn't know it exists because we didn't file the deed with his solicitor. We kept it private until necessary. He says he's going to the bank tomorrow," I said. "Let him go," Mr. Whitmore said. "I will have a courier at the courthouse at 8:00 a.m. By the time your father walks into the bank, his authority won't just be suspended, Nadine. He'll be walking into a federal crime scene." I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just a defense. This was an ambush. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Nothing," Mr. Whitmore said. "Go home, take some tea, turn off your phone. Tomorrow the world changes for Thornton." I hung up the phone. I looked back at the restaurant one last time. Through the window I could see them. Penelope was laughing, her head thrown back. Thornton was pouring wine, looking smug, the lord of the manor. They had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath them had already ceased to exist. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, watching the digital clock on my nightstand tick through the hours. 2:00 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4:45 a.m. The silence in my house, the empty house Penelope had mocked, felt different tonight. It didn't feel lonely. It felt like a fortress. By 7:00 a.m., I was dressed. I made coffee, but I couldn't drink it. I was vibrating with a mixture of terror and anticipation. It was the feeling of standing on a high diving board, knowing you've already leaned too far forward to stop the fall. At 8:05 a.m., my phone buzzed. It wasn't my father. It was Mr. Whitmore. "Good morning, Nadine?" His voice was crisp, cutting through the morning fog in my brain. "The courier has delivered the injunction to the bank's legal department, and a copy has been served to your father's solicitor. The assets are frozen." Did it work?" I asked, gripping the counter. "It worked perfectly," he said. "The bank manager at the main branch has been alerted. When Thornton attempts to authorize the transfer, the system will flag the account as under litigation. He won't be able to move a penny, not to Penelope, and certainly not to himself." "What do I do now?" "Now you come to my office," Mr. Whitmore said. "There is something you need to see." While preparing the injunction, I had my forensic accountant take a preliminary look at the estate's activity over the last 6 months. The period where Thornton held power of attorney while your grandmother was in hospice, We found irregularities. The drive to Mr. Whitmore's office took 40 minutes, but I don't remember any of it. My mind was racing. Irregularities. That was a polite lawyer word for theft. Mr. Whitmore's office was in an old brownstone downtown, the kind with heavy oak doors and the smell of dust and expensive leather. When I arrived, he was sitting behind a desk that looked like it weighed more than my car. He didn't smile. He gestured to a leather chair and slid a thick file folder across the mahogany surface. "Open it," he instructed. I flipped open the cover. It was a spreadsheet dense with numbers, dates, and transaction codes. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "This," he pointed a manicured finger at a highlighted column, "is the primary liquid asset account. The money your grandmother intended to be split between you, Penelope, and the maintenance fund for the property. When Cordelia entered hospice care, the balance was just under $2 million. He flipped the page. "This is the balance as of yesterday." I looked at the number. My breath hitched in my throat. $450,000. I whispered. "Where? Where did the rest go?" "That is the question," Whitmore said grimly. "Thornton has been drawing down on the account at a rate of $50,000 a week for administrative expenses and consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in Delaware. He's been draining the estate dry before it even hit probate." I felt sick. Physically sick. He wasn't taking my share to give to Penelope because she needed it. I realized the horror dawning on me. He was taking my share because there isn't enough money left to pay us both. "Precisely." Whitmore nodded. "He needed your portion to cover the hole he dug. If he paid you your rightful share, the account would overdraft, and his embezzlement would be exposed immediately. By guilt-tripping you into donating your share to Penelope, he could give Penelope the remaining scraps, look like a hero, and hide the fact that he stole over $1 million. I sat back, the room spinning slightly. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just Dad being a bully. It was a crime. A massive, calculated betrayal. He had looked me in the eye at dinner, lectured me about morality and family duty, all while hiding the fact that he had looted his own mother's legacy while she was dying in a hospital bed. "We have him, Nadine," Whitmore said softly. "This isn't just grounds for removal as executor. This is prison time." My phone started ringing while I was still in Whitmore's office. The screen lit up with Dad. I looked at Whitmore. He nodded. "Answer it. Put it on speaker. Do not agree to anything. Just listen." I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the green button. I pressed it. "Nadine." Thornton's voice exploded out of the speaker so loud it distorted. He wasn't just angry. He was hysterical. I could hear background noise, traffic, car horns. He was driving. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" "I don't know what you mean, Dad," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Don't play dumb with me," he screamed. "I'm at the bank. They told me the accounts are frozen. They said there's a court order. The manager, that little pipsqueak, he threatened to call security if I didn't lower my voice. He said I'm under investigation for fiduciary breach." "You are," I said. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and terrifying. Then his voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "You ungrateful little brat. You went to a lawyer after everything we've done for you." "I went to grandmother's lawyer," I corrected him. "Mr. Whitmore? Whitmore?" Thornton laughed a manic, jagged sound. "That old corpse. He has no authority. I fired him. Grandmother hired him," I said, gaining strength from the file folder sitting in front of me. "She created a separate trust, Dad, the Cordelia V. Mitchell Legacy Trust. She moved my inheritance into it 2 years ago. You don't control it. You never did. And because you tried to access it this morning using a general power of attorney, you triggered a compliance audit. You set me up," he sputtered. "I asked you a question," I said. "I asked if grandmother knew you lied. So I let the legal system answer for her." "Undo it," he demanded. "Call Whitmore right now and tell him it was a mistake. Tell him to lift the freeze. If you don't, Nadine, I swear to God, I will come over there and what? I cut him off. Hit me like you used to hit the wall when you lost money on those stocks? Or are you going to scream at me until I give up?" I'm coming to your house, he said. We are going to settle this. You, me, and your mother. You are going to sign a waiver. Don't come to my house, I said. I'm not there. Where are you? I'm looking at the ledger, Dad, I said, letting the words hang in the air. I'm looking at the withdrawals, $50,000 a week, consulting fees. Who is RLK Holdings' dad? The line went dead. Mr. Whitmore looked at me with a rare expression of approval. Well handled, but he will not stop. A man like Thornton, when cornered, does not surrender. He attacks. He said he's coming to my house. I said. He will, Whitmore agreed. And he will bring the rest of the family. He needs allies to browbeat you. He needs to turn this into an emotional argument, because he has lost the legal one. I need to go home, I said, standing up. I need to protect my space. I can't let them intimidate me. Take the file, Whitmore said, pushing it toward me. Make copies. Do not let that original out of your sight. And Nadine, if you feel unsafe, call the police. He is your father, but right now he is a desperate man facing indictment. I drove home with the file on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw that I was already too late. My parents' SUV was parked crookedly on the curb, blocking my mailbox, and right behind it was Penelope's minivan. They were standing on my front porch, Thornton, Vivian, and Penelope. Thornton was pacing back and forth, his face a mottled red. Vivian was crying, clutching a tissue. Penelope looked furious, her arms crossed over her chest. They looked like a lynch mob in suburban casual wear. I parked the car in the garage and closed the door before getting out. I wanted a barrier. I walked through the internal door into my kitchen, checking the locks. Bam, bam, bam. Thornton was pounding on the front door. Open this door, Nadine, he roared. I know you're in there. I walked to the front hallway. Through the frosted glass, I could see his distorted silhouette. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the wood. Go away, Dad. Nadine, please. It was Mom this time. Her voice was high and thin. Please, honey. Just let us in. We just want to talk. Your father is so upset. He's having chest pains. You're killing him. He's not having chest pains, Mom, I said, leaning my forehead against the cool door. He's having a panic attack because he got caught. Caught doing what? Penelope yelled. Trying to help me. You're such a jealous witch, Nadine. You can't stand that I have a family and you don't. You'd rather burn the money than see my kids have a good life. It's not about the kids, Penelope, I shouted back, my control finally slipping. It's about the fact that there is no money. Silence. Absolute silence on the porch. What did you say? Penelope asked, her voice muffled but distinct. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, leaving the security chain on. I looked through the gap. Penelope was staring at me, confused. Thornton looked like he wanted to kick the door down. Ask him, I said, pointing a shaking finger at Thornton. Ask Dad where the $2 million went. Ask him why there's only $400,000 left in the account. Ask him about the consulting fees. She's lying. Thornton screamed, lunging at the door. The chain rattled violently as the wood groaned under his weight. She's a liar. She's trying to tear this family apart. I slammed the door shut and locked the deadbolt again. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I'm calling the police if you don't leave, I yelled. You wouldn't dare, Thornton growled. Try me, I said. I have the ledger, Dad. I have everything. They didn't leave immediately. They stayed on my porch for another 20 minutes. Thornton alternated between threats and begging. Vivian sobbed loudly, wailing about how I was destroying the family legacy. Penelope just stood there, silent. Eventually, the neighbors started coming out onto their lawns. The humiliation of a public scene was the one thing that could penetrate Thornton's rage. He bundled them into the cars and they peeled away, but not before he kicked over my potted fern. I waited until they were gone. Then, I collapsed onto the floor of my hallway. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, but the peace didn't last. By evening, the digital assault began. My phone blew up with texts, not just from them, but from extended family. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Aunts who lived in Arizona. Aunt Regina, I heard what you did to your father, freezing his accounts. How could you be so cruel? He's provided everything for you. Cousin Dermot, so you're really suing your own dad. That's low. Thornton was spinning the narrative. He was telling everyone I was a greedy, vindictive daughter who was suing the estate because I was jealous of Penelope. He was omitting the part about the theft. He was relying on the fact that family business usually stays private, and that I would be too embarrassed to tell the truth. He was wrong. I went into my home office and laid out the documents Mr. Whitmore had given me. I needed to understand the full picture. I needed to know exactly where the money had gone because that was the key to breaking his hold on Mom and Penelope. I spent the next 4 hours cross-referencing the consulting fees with public records. Mr. Whitmore had done the heavy lifting, but I found the details. RLK Holdings, the shell company receiving the money, was registered to an address in a shabby industrial park. A quick search of the address revealed it was a virtual office, but the signatories... I found a scanned document in the file Whitmore gave me. The signatory for RLK Holdings wasn't Thornton. It was a man named Gideon Price. I searched the name. Gideon Price was a local investment guru who had been investigated twice for Ponzi scheme-like structures involving cryptocurrency and high-yield real estate bonds. Thornton hadn't just spent the money. He had gambled it. He had thrown grandmother's legacy into a scam, hoping to double it and look like a genius. And when the returns didn't come, he started cannibalizing the principal to hide the losses. And then I found the smoking gun. Buried in the transaction logs was a transfer from 3 months ago, $40,000. The memo line said, Penelope contractor deposit. I frowned. Penelope had said the extension was stalled for 2 years. If Dad gave her $40,000 3 months ago, the work should be done. I pulled up the text thread with Penelope. I hesitated, then typed, me. Penelope, did Dad give you $40,000 in October for the contractor? She replied instantly. She must have been staring at her phone. Penelope, go to hell, Nadine. Me. I'm serious. The ledger shows a $40,000 transfer to your account on October 12th. Did you get it? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Penelope. No. He told me the estate was tied up in probate, and he couldn't release any funds until next year. That's why he said we needed your share. He said your share was liquid, but the rest was stuck in assets. I stared at the screen. The lie was so multi-layered it was dizzying. Thornton had transferred the money out of the estate, labeled it Penelope, but redirected it to himself or his debts. He had used Penelope's name to launder the theft. Me. He stole it, Penelope. He marked it as sent to you, but he kept it. That's why he needs my share. He needs to fill the hole before the auditors see it. He's using you. Penelope. Liar. Me. Image attachment. Photo of the bank ledger highlighting the transaction. Me. Call the bank. Ask them if a transfer was initiated to you on October 12th. Or better yet, ask Dad why the check image associated with this transfer was endorsed by him, not you. There was no reply. I sat back. I had planted the seed. Penelope was entitled. Yes, she was spoiled, but she was also desperate for money. And nothing makes a person turn faster than realizing the money they were promised had already been stolen by the person promising it. The next morning, the escalation reached its peak. I received a courier envelope at my door. It wasn't from Thornton. It was a cease and desist letter from Thornton's lawyer, the strip mall guy. It accused me of elder abuse, claiming I had coerced grandmother into signing the trust documents while she was mentally incompetent. They were threatening to invalidate the entire trust. It was a desperate, scorched earth tactic. By claiming grandmother was incompetent, Thornton was willing to drag her memory through the mud, claiming she was senile and manipulated just to get his hands on the money. I called Whitmore. He's filed a motion to contest the trust validity, Whitmore said, sounding more bored than worried. He claims Cordelia lacked capacity. He's lying, I said, furious. She was sharp as a tack until the end. We know that, and we have the video, Whitmore said. Video? Standard procedure for high-value estate changes involving elderly clients, Whitmore said. I filmed the signing. Cordelia looks into the camera, states the date, states her intent, and specifically says, I am doing this to protect my assets from my son Thornton, who has no head for business. It is admissible in court. It is irrefutable. When can we use it? Tomorrow, Whitmore said. Thornton has called for an emergency family meeting at your Aunt Regina's house to mediate this before he proceeds with the lawsuit. He thinks he can shame you into settling in front of the extended family. He thinks the threat of the lawsuit is his ace in the hole. He wants a public showdown, I asked. He wants a public surrender, Whitmore corrected. But if you bring the evidence, if you bring the ledger and the video, you can give him a public execution. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. Thornton wanted to do this in front of everyone. He wanted to paint me as the villain in front of the aunts and cousins. Fine. I'll be there, I said. Aunt Regina's house was the traditional neutral ground for our family, a sprawling suburban home filled with overstuffed furniture and photos of smiling grandchildren. But when I walked in that Saturday afternoon, it felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. The living room was packed. My parents were there, of course. Thornton sat in the center of the beige sectional like a king on a throne flanked by a weeping Vivian. Penelope sat on the edge of the fireplace hearth looking pale and chewing a fingernail. But the room was also filled with the jury. Aunt Regina, Uncle Dermot, 2 of my older cousins, and even Gray Aunt Millicent. Thornton had rallied the troops. When I entered, the conversation died instantly. The silence was thick, heavy with judgment. You came, Thornton said, his voice dripping with faux sadness. He didn't stand up. I'm glad, Nadine. Maybe we can finally put this ugly business behind us. Have a seat, Nadine, Aunt Regina said, gesturing to a hard wooden chair placed in the center of the room, facing the sofa. It looked suspiciously like an interrogation spot. I'll stand, I said, clutching my bag. Inside was my laptop and the file. Nadine. Thornton began putting on his glasses and looking over them at the assembled family. We are all here because we love you, but we are deeply concerned. Your behavior over the last few days, freezing the family accounts, threatening your own father with legal action, it suggests a mental break. We think the stress of your job and your isolation has gotten to you. I'm not isolated, Dad, I said calmly. You are attacking your family, Uncle Dermot chimed in from the corner. Your dad is trying to manage Cordelia's estate for everyone's benefit, and you're acting like he's a criminal. You need to drop this lawsuit, Nadine. It's embarrassing. He is a criminal, I said, my voice cutting through the room. Gasps rippled through the room. Vivian let out a fresh wail. Oh, stop it. Stop it. How can you say that? Thornton stood up, his face darkening. That is enough. I called this meeting to give you a chance to apologize and sign the waiver. If you don't, I am filing the petition to invalidate the trust on Monday. We will prove that you manipulated a senile old woman into cutting out her own son. Grandmother wasn't senile, I said, and she didn't cut you out because I asked her to. She cut you out because she knew exactly who you are. She didn't know what she was signing, Thornton shouted, losing his composure. She was on medication. She couldn't even remember the day of the week. Is that so? I asked. I walked over to the large flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace. Penelope shifted away from me, looking scared. I pulled the HDMI cable from the back of the cable box and plugged it into my laptop. What are you doing? Aunt Regina asked. Showing you the truth, I said. I hit the space bar. The screen flickered to life. The audio was crisp. It was a video recording of Grandmother Cordelia sitting in her favorite armchair in the hospice room. She looked frail, yes, but her eyes were sharp, staring directly into the lens. Next to her, holding a newspaper with the date visible, was Mr. Whitmore. State your name and intent, Whitmore's voice said from off-camera. Cordelia Victoria Mitchell. Grandmother's voice filled the room. It was strong, devoid of the confusion Thornton claimed she had. I am of sound mind. I am creating the legacy trust for my granddaughter, Nadine. In the living room, Thornton went rigid. Turn it off, he snapped. "This is private." "Let her play it," Uncle Dermot said, his voice lower now. He was leaning forward. "On the screen," Grandmother continued, "I am doing this separately from the main will, because I do not trust my son Thornton with liquid assets. Over the last 20 years, I have bailed him out of 6 failed business ventures. He has no respect for money, only for the status it buys." Vivian gasped. Thornton looked like he was having a stroke. She's reading a script. Nadine wrote that for her. But the video continued. Grandmother leaned closer to the camera. "Thornton," she said, addressing the lens directly, "I know you will see this. I know you will try to fight it. You will tell everyone that Nadine is greedy. But we both know the truth. You feel entitled to what I built. You are not. This money is for Nadine because she is the only one who never asked me for a penny. And for Penelope. Poor Penelope." In the living room, Penelope's head snapped up. On screen, Grandmother sighed. "I wanted to leave money to Penelope, but I know if I leave it to her directly, Thornton will talk her out of it, or her husband will spend it on nonsense. So, I am leaving a strict instruction. If Thornton attempts to access the main estate before probate clears, he is to be removed as executor immediately." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in Aunt Regina's living room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Thornton was shaking. He looked around the room, seeing the doubt in his sibling's eyes. She was confused. "She didn't mean that. She seemed pretty clear to me, Thornton." Uncle Dermot muttered. "There's one more thing," I said. I pulled the file folder from my bag and opened it. I took out the enlarged copy of the bank ledger and the check image. I walked over to Penelope. "Penelope," I said softly, "look at this." "I don't want to," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at it," I commanded gently. She looked. I pointed to the entry. October 12th, $40,000 withdrawn. Memo, Penelope, contractor. "Dad told you he couldn't give you money because the estate was frozen," I said. "But he withdrew $40,000 in your name 3 months ago. He cashed it. See the signature on the back of the check? That's not your signature. That's Dad's." Penelope stared at the paper. Her hands started to tremble. She looked up at Thornton. You told me the court had it," Penelope said, her voice cracking. "I had to take out a payday loan to fix the boiler. Dad, I had to sell my engagement ring and you had $40,000. "It's complicated," Thornton yelled, sweating profusely now. "I was investing it. I was going to turn it into $80,000 for you. It was a sure thing. RLK Holdings was going to pay out next month." "RLK Holdings is a Ponzi scheme, Dad," I said, delivering the final blow. I looked it up. The money is gone. All of it. The $2 million from the main account. Gone. The $40,000 for Penelope. Gone. You gambled Grandmother's entire legacy away. The air went out of the room. Vivian let out a sound that wasn't a cry. It was a keen of pure devastation. She slumped against the cushions, realizing that her lifestyle, her security, her home, it was all smoke. Uncle Dermot stood up slowly. He looked at his brother with pure disgust. "You spent Mother's money, all of it." "I was trying to build something," Thornton screamed, cornered like a rat. "I did it for this family. You don't understand the pressure." "I understand that you're a thief," Penelope said. She stood up. She walked over to Thornton. For a second, I thought she was going to hug him. Instead, she slapped him. A hard, ringing slap that echoed through the house. "Don't you ever," she hissed, "mention my children again. You stole their future." Thornton looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with hate and panic. "Nadine, please. You have the trust. You have money. You can fix this. Just write a check. Cover the losses. We can fix this." I looked at the man who had tried to steal my inheritance, who had gaslit me, who had tried to turn my entire family against me. I looked at him and I felt nothing but a profound, exhausting pity. "No, Dad," I said. "I can't fix this. But Mr. Whitmore can. The police are on their way." The fallout was swift and brutal. Thornton was arrested that afternoon. Mr. Whitmore hadn't been bluffing about the federal crime scene. Because Thornton had moved money across state lines to the shell company, and because he had forged Penelope's signature on bank documents, he was facing multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He tried to fight it, of course. He hired a cheap lawyer who tried to argue intent, but the paper trail was undeniable. 3 months later, he took a plea deal to avoid a 10-year sentence. He got 4 years in a minimum security facility plus restitution, but there was no money for restitution. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, had to be sold to cover the debts he had racked up. Vivian was left with almost nothing. It was a tragedy for her in a way. She had spent 40 years enabling him, looking the other way, enjoying the illusion of wealth. Now the illusion was gone. She moved into a small 1-bedroom condo in a retirement community. She's quieter now. She calls me once a week, and for the first time in my life, she asks me how I am, and she actually listens to the answer. I think she finally respects me. Not because I have money, but because I was the only one strong enough to stop him. And Penelope. The revelation broke her. She realized that while she was the golden child, she was also the primary victim. Thornton had used her neediness as a shield for his greed. We sat down for coffee 2 months after the arrest. She looked tired, but the frantic, entitled energy was gone. She was humbled. "I'm sorry, Nadine," she said, staring into her latte, "for everything I said at the restaurant for thinking you were the selfish one." "It's okay," I said. "He manipulated us both. He played us against each other so we wouldn't look at him." "I don't know what we're going to do," she admitted, wiping a tear. "The extension is still half finished. The twins need braces." I know. I have no right to ask, and I'm not asking. I'm scared." I reached into my bag and pulled out a document. It wasn't a check. It was a deed of trust. "I'm not giving you cash, Penelope," I said, "because if I give you cash, your husband will spend it, or you'll use it to patch holes instead of fixing the foundation." She nodded, looking defeated, but I slid the document across the table. "I set up an education and housing trust for the kids. Grandmother's money, my share is in there. It pays for the completion of your house directly to the contractors I approve, and it pays for the kids' school and medical needs directly to the providers." Penelope looked up, her eyes widening. "Nadine, you don't have to do that. Dad said you hated kids." "Dad said a lot of things." I smiled. "I don't hate kids, Penelope. I just didn't want my own. But I loved grandmother, and she wanted the great-grandkids to be safe. This is what she would have wanted." Penelope burst into tears. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was the first time we had touched in years without it being a performance. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you." I drove home that evening feeling lighter than I had in years. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I walked into my study and looked at the framed photo of Grandmother Cordelia on my desk. She was smiling that cryptic, knowing smile. "We did it, Grandmother," I whispered. "We were smart, and we weren't polite." I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my favorite chair, and watched the sun go down. I had my life. I had my integrity. And for the first time, I had a family that was built on truth, not secrets. It was the best birthday present I could have ever asked for.